Hello everyone, welcome back. In the previous video, we had completed our brief conversation page, and now we have the ability inside of our conversation page to actually text messages as well as images. And on this video, we are actually going to create the ability for us to actually search the user and then either start a conversation with them if we have never had a conversation with them, or if you already have a conversation with them, then when we click on them, go show the conversation page and actually load in all of the messages of that conversation that we were having with them. So without anything further to do, let's get into it. So the first thing we're going to do is that we're going to go to our database service and we're going to create a new function here. So what I'm going to do is that after our actual send message function, I'm going to create a new function. Function is going to return a future of type void, and I'll call our function actually create conversation, and you get to create or get conversation, because this function is going to perform two things. Once we have this, the next thing we are going to do is that we are going to get in a string of the current ID of our user. So we'll get in a string that gives us the current ID of our user, and we'll get in a string that gives us the actual recipient's ID. And this will become clearer as we code this function, why we need both of these. And then finally, what we'll also need is going to be a function that gets passed in, and this function is going to return a future void, and this function will call on success. So this will be called once we have successfully created or actually retrieved the conversation from the database. And then this function would also get in conversation ID as its input, so conversation ID as a parameter passed to it. Once we're done with that, we can open the function block. And with that, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to mark our function asynchronous, and then I'll do Alt-Shift-F, Command save. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do inside of this function is that we're going to get a reference to our data. And the way we're going to do this is that we'll go to database.collection and then the actual conversation collection. And it's actually conversations collection. With this reference defined, what we'll do is that we'll get a conversation reference. So this will be a reference to our actual conversations inside of our users collection. So for that, what I'll do is I'll do _db and then .collection, and then it'll be our users collection. And from there, what we'll do is that we'll go to a document, and the document would be our current user, so current user's ID. And then what I'll do is that we'll go to the collection, and this collection is going to be our conversations collection, and here we'll have our user collection. With this, what I'll do is I'll add a semicolon. So the first reference is the reference to our actual conversations collection, and the other reference that we have is the collection is the reference to the actual certain users conversation collection, and we can actually rename it to user conversation collection. Okay, so with this done, the next thing we are going to do is that we're going to have a try statement, and inside of try statement, first thing we're going to do is that when a user clicks on a user inside of our search page, we're going to go and search that are we actually having a conversation with that user. If so, then we'll just retrieve that conversation, and if not, then we'll actually create the conversation. So let's get going with that. So firstly, what we'll do is that we'll check that we have the conversation. For that, what I'll do is that I'll create a variable. I'll call this conversation. Inside of here, what I'll do is that I'll await, and I'll take our user conversation reference, and then inside of our user conversation reference, I'll take a document, and the document would be actually our recipient's ID. And then what we'll do is that we'll call the get function. Okay, if we do this, then what we're going to do is that we're going to check if our conversation has some data. So we're going to do conversation.data, and conversation.data is not equal to null. If our conversation has data, then what we're going to do is that we're going to return our actual onSuccess function. So we'll do onSuccess, and inside of our onSuccess function, we'll pass in the conversation, then .data, and then the actual conversation ID. So we'll retrieve the conversation, and we'll just give the onSuccess function that, and do Alt-Shift-F Command save. And if this fails, then what we'll have to do is that we would have to actually create a chat. So for that, what I'll do is that I'll add the else clause. And inside of our else clause, what I'll do is I'll firstly get a reference to our actual chat document. So we'll create a new chat document, or So for that, what I'll do firstly is that I'll create a reference to our conversation document. So conversation reference, and this would be equals to our actual reference. So our conversations collection dot document. So we'll create a new document. Once we have that, what we're going to do is that we are going to await, and we are going to take our conversation reference, and we're going to set some data for the conversation. So there are two things that we have to set. Firstly, we have to set the actual members. So MEMBR, and the members, if you remember, was an array. So our array would have our current ID, so the current user's ID, and our recipient's ID. And then after that, we would also require the actual owner, and the owner ID is going to be, in this case, our actual current ID, because this is the user that starts the conversation. And then after that, what I'll do is I'll add a comma here, and I'll add a space here, and a semicolon here, and I'll do Alt-Shift-F, Command save. Okay, and once we have this, the last thing we are going to do is that we're going to return our onSuccess function, and inside of our onSuccess function, we'll take our conversation reference and we'll give it the document ID. So this is going to be our actual conversation. And with this, what I'll do is that I'll do Alt-Shift-F, Command save. Now with this, then what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go to our catch statement. I'm going to just print our error if you get it. And then I'm going to do Alt-Shift-F, Command save. So with this, we have defined our create or get conversation function. Now what we'll do is that we'll hop on over to our actual search page. And inside of our search page, we'll firstly import our database service, which was already imported. We'll go down to where we have our actual list view tile. So list view builder, and then inside of the item builder, we have our list tile. But before we get going with that, what I would like to do is actually fix the fit of our images. So I'll do boxfit.cover, and hopefully the images now look much better. With that, what I'll do is that I'll actually go to where we have the onTap function inside of our list view, list tile, and we don't have one. So what I'll do is I'll add an onTap function, and inside of this onTap function, we will do all of the corresponding logic. So firstly, what we'll do is that we'll call our database service function. So I'll call database service dot instance and then dot get create or get conversation. Then we'll have to pass in our current ID, recipient's ID, and onSuccess function. So for that, what we'll do is that we'll take the actual current ID of our user, and the current ID is going to be our auth.user.uid. And then what we'll need is also our recipient's ID, so the ID of our other user. And for do that, what I'm going to do is that I am going to go to the top here, and I'll set in a var as recipient's ID, and this would be equal to, and what we'll do is that we'll get the actual user's data, and then the index, and then inside of there we would have his ID. And then what I'll do is that I'll take this recipient ID and I'll paste it here. And once we have that, the last thing we are going to do is that we are going to have our onSuccess function. So our onSuccess function, as you remembered, took in an actual conversation ID. So we'll take in so conversation ID, and the type of this is going to be string. And what we're going to do now is that we're going to open our function block, and I'll add a semicolon here and do Alt-Shift-F. So with this done, the last thing we're going to do is that we're going to actually, once our function is done with actually creating or getting a conversation that's already existing, we'll navigate to the actual conversation page. So for that, what I'll do is that I'll use our navigation service, and we would have to import it first. So I'll go to the top and I'll import our navigation service, so import./services, and then our actual navigation service, and then we'll come down, and inside of here we'll do navigation service and then .instance, and then what we'll do is that we'll use the navigate using navigate to route, and inside of here we'll provide a material page route, and then the material page route would require a builder function. The builder function would take in a context, so context, and then here I'll add these, I'll add the semicolon, and I'll add a comma, and I'll do Alt-Shift-F, Command save. So once we have this, the last thing we are going to do is that we are going to get our actual conversation page return. So I'll return our actual conversation page, and for that we would have to import our page. So I'll go to the top and then I'll import it. So I'll do import and then / pages and then actual conversation page. We'll also have to have command save, come down, and now we can actually return our conversation page. So our conversation page would require a conversation ID that we already gave it. It would also require the actual receiver's ID, and for that what we'll do is that we'll take the recipient ID that we already had. The receiver name would be our actual user's name. So for that what I'll do is that I'll take in the user data, so user data, and then we'll have the .name inside of there, and then for the user image we'll have the actual user data, and then we'll have the image. And with that I'm going to add a semicolon, and I'll do Alt-Shift-F, command save. And then what I'm going to do is that I am going to reload our application, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we should now navigate to our conversations page. So as you can see, our current user Hussein has 2 conversations going on with James and Tom. So if I click on a conversation with Tom, it's going to take us to an already existing conversation which we had with Tom. With James, it's going to take us to an already existing conversation we had with James. Now with Leonardo or Scar, we don't have a conversation yet. So if I click on that, it's going to take us there, and we won't have any conversation as of now. So with that, I'm going to end this video here, and now in the next video we're going to fix up a couple of errors. So with that, I'm going to end this video here, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.